The big spacecraft called Star Voyager slowly docked at the huge space station. The space station looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness of space. Tiny lights blinked across its surface. The Star Voyager carried 20 human students from Earth. They were the first humans ever to join the Galactic Academy. Jack Carter stood by the window, watching as the station grew larger. He was tall with short brown hair and green eyes. His heart beat fast with excitement and fear. Only 5 years ago, aliens had first visited Earth. Now he was going to study with them. "All passengers prepare for docking," said a voice over the speaker. "Please gather your things." Jack picked up his small bag. It held everything he needed for the next year. The Earth government told all the students to pack light. The aliens might not like too many Earth things. Susan Miller walked up next to Jack. She had long red hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She was the smartest person Jack had ever met. Back on Earth, she had won every math contest since she was 10 years. "Old, are you ready?" Susan asked. Her voice was calm, but Jack saw her hands shaking a little. "Not really," Jack said with a small laugh. "I still can't believe they picked me." "They picked you because you solve problems in ways no one else does," Susan said. "That's what they want to study, how humans think differently." The ship made a soft bump as it connected to the space station. The doors slid open with a quiet hiss. A tall blue alien waited for them. It had 4 arms and 2 large eyes that looked like black marbles. "Welcome, humans," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Professor Zarn. I will be your guide at the Galactic Academy." The students walked off the ship in a line. Jack noticed how different the air smelled. It wasn't bad, just strange, like metal and something sweet he couldn't name. "You will each be given a room in the student area," Professor Zarn said. "Tomorrow your classes begin. You are the first humans to study here. Many are watching to see how you do." Jack and the other students followed Professor Zarn through long hallways. The walls were made of a strange material that seemed to glow softly. Other aliens passed by. Some had many legs. Others floated instead of walking. They all stopped to look at the Wyan. "Humans. They're staring at us," Jack whispered to Susan. "We'd stare at them on Earth too," Susan said. "We're probably the weirdest things they've seen." Professor Zarn stopped at a large round door. "These are your rooms. The computer will understand English. Ask it if you need anything." The alien handed each student a small metal disc. "These will help you find your way around. Do not lose them." When Professor Zarn left, Jack went into his room. It was simple but nice. There was a bed that seemed to float above the floor. A desk sat by the wall with a screen on it. A window showed the stars outside. Jack sat on the bed. It felt like sitting on a cloud. He thought about home, about his parents waving goodbye at the launch pad. They had been so proud when he was chosen for this program. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on his door. He opened it to find Susan. "Want to explore?" she asked with a smile. They walked through the station together, using their discs to guide them. They found a large room with a glass ceiling that showed the stars. Small tables were scattered around, and aliens of all kinds sat at them, talking in strange languages. "It's like a cafeteria," Jack said. They sat at an empty table. Soon, a small robot came to them. "Would you like refreshments?" it asked in a mechanical voice. "What do you recommend?" Susan asked. "For humans, I suggest water or fruit juice. Our scans show most other drinks here might upset your stomachs." "Water is fine," Jack said. The robot left and quickly returned with 2 cups of water that glowed slightly blue. "Is it safe?" Jack whispered, looking at the glowing water. Susan took a small sip. "It tastes like normal water, just cleaner somehow." As they drank, 3 aliens approached their table. They were tall with green skin and long, thin arms. Their faces had no noses, just small breathing holes. "You are the humans, yes?" one asked. Its voice sounded like wind through leaves. "Yes," Susan said. "I'm Susan, and this is Jack." "We are students of logic and mathematics," another alien said. "We have heard humans think in unusual ways. Is this true?" "I guess so," Jack said. "We all think differently, even from each other." Interesting, the third alien said. Our professor says humans are too new to space travel to understand complex problems. He says your brains are too simple. Jack felt his face grow hot. That's not true. We solved plenty of complex problems to get into space. Then perhaps you would like to prove it, the first alien said. Come to the mathematics hall tomorrow after your classes. Our professor has a famous puzzle no one has solved in 300 years. If humans are truly smart, perhaps you can try it. After the aliens left, Susan looked worried. Jack, we shouldn't make enemies on our first day. They're not our enemies, Jack said. They're just challenging us, and I'm going to that math hall tomorrow. Later that night, as Jack lay on his floating bed, he couldn't sleep. The stars outside his window were different from the ones he saw on Earth. Everything here was different. He wondered if he belonged here at all. His disc made a soft beeping sound. He picked it up and saw a message from Susan. Going to the math hall with you tomorrow. Humans stick together. Jack smiled and finally closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be their first real test at the Galactic Academy. He hoped they were ready. The next morning, Jack woke up to a soft chiming sound. He opened his eyes and saw the room's light slowly getting brighter. He had almost forgotten where he was. Then it all came back to him. He was on a space station, far from Earth, about to start classes with aliens. Jack got dressed in the simple gray uniform all human students were given. He touched the small metal disc Professor Zarn had given him. A map appeared in the air in front of him, showing the way to the dining area. In the hallway, he met Susan. She looked tired but excited. Did you sleep? Jack asked. Not much, Susan said. I kept thinking about that math challenge. I looked at my class schedule. We have basic galactic history first, then interspecies communication. They walked to the dining area together. Many alien students were already there. Some ate strange-looking foods. Others drank colorful liquids. Jack and Susan went to a counter marked Earth Foods. A robot gave them bowls of something that looked like oatmeal. It tasted better than it looked. Our first class starts in 20 minutes, Susan said, checking the map on her disc. The Galactic History classroom was huge. Rows of seats went up high like in a sports stadium. Different types of seats were built for different alien bodies. Jack and Susan found the human section and sat down. A tall, thin alien with skin like gold metal stood at the front of the room. This was Professor Kelnar, according to their schedules. Welcome to Basic Galactic History, Professor Kelnar said. Its voice sounded like bells. Today, we will start with the founding of the Galactic Alliance, 8,000 Earth years ago. Jack tried to pay attention, but his mind kept going back to the math challenge. He wondered what kind of puzzle had stumped aliens for 300 years. After galactic history came interspecies communication. This class was taught by a round alien that changed colors as it spoke. Professor Blinn explained how different species communicated in different ways. Humans rely heavily on facial expressions, Professor Blinn said, turning a bright orange color. This is unusual among galactic species. Many species cannot see such small muscle movements. Finally, classes ended for the day. Jack and Susan went back to the dining area for a quick meal. Then they checked their maps for the mathematics hall. Are you sure about this? Susan asked as they walked. No, Jack admitted. But I want to see this famous puzzle. The mathematics hall was a large round room with a high ceiling. Strange symbols covered the walls. About 20 alien students stood in groups talking. Jack saw the 3 green aliens from yesterday. One of them walked over. You came. Good. I am Lorg. These are Plex and Ziv. Nice to meet you, Jack said. This is Susan. Our professor will be here soon, Lorg said. He does not think much of humans, so do not feel bad when you fail his puzzle. Before Jack could answer, the door opened. A new alien entered. It was tall with blue skin and 4 eyes on stalks. It wore a robe covered in mathematical symbols. That's Professor Crix, Lorg whispered. He is the greatest mathematician in the academy. Professor Crix looked at the humans with all 4 eyes. "So these are the Earth students," he said. His voice was deep and seemed to echo. "I hear you wish to try my puzzle." "Yes, Professor," Susan said politely. "Very well. It might be educational for you." Professor Crix touched a control panel on the wall. A large hologram appeared in the middle of the room. It showed a strange shape. At first, it looked simple, like a cube. Then it began to change, folding in on itself, becoming more complex with each change. "This is the spiral paradox," Professor Crix said. "It appears simple, but each transformation follows rules that no one has been able to fully understand. After 1,000 transformations, it will form a specific pattern. No one has been able to predict what that pattern will be without watching all transformations." Jack watched the shape continue to change. It was beautiful, but confusing. How could anyone predict what it would look like after 1,000 changes? "The challenge," Professor Crix continued, "is to predict the final pattern without watching each step. For 300 years, no one has solved it. Our greatest computers cannot find the answer." Susan stepped closer to the hologram, studying it carefully. "May I ask questions about it?" "You may," Professor Crix said, sounding amused. "Does it always start as a cube?" "Yes." "And does each transformation follow the same rules?" "Yes, but the rules are complex and change based on the current state." Susan walked slowly around the hologram, watching it from all angles. Jack could almost see her brain working. "I'd like to try something," Susan said after a few minutes. She took out a small notebook and pencil she had brought from Earth. The aliens watched curiously as she began to draw. Jack looked over her shoulder. She was drawing the shape at different stages, making notes beside each drawing. Her hand moved quickly across the paper. The aliens whispered among themselves. Professor Crix watched with his 4 eyes narrowed. "Can you show it from the beginning again?" Susan asked. Professor Crix reset the hologram. The shape returned to a simple cube and began transforming again. Susan watched closely, making more notes. After 20 minutes, she stopped writing and looked up. "I think I see the pattern now." The room went silent. Professor Crix blinked all 4 eyes. "You cannot possibly. The final pattern will look like this," Susan said. She held up her notebook, showing a drawing of a complex but symmetrical shape. Professor Crix stared at her drawing. "That is impossible. No one can solve it so quickly." "Can we check?" Jack asked. "Can you show all 1,000 transformations?" Professor Crix seemed stunned but touched the control panel again. The hologram began changing more rapidly. Everyone watched as it went through hundreds of transformations, becoming more and more complex. Finally, it stopped. The final shape hovered in the air. It matched Susan's drawing perfectly. The alien students made high-pitched sounds of surprise. Professor Crix's 4 eye stalks extended to their full length. "How?" he asked, his deep voice now quiet. "How did you solve it?" Susan smiled. "I noticed that the transformations weren't random. They followed a pattern based on music." "Music?" Professor Crix asked. "Yes. The changes follow the same pattern as classical Earth music, Bach's music specifically. Each transformation is like a note in a fugue repeating and building on what came before." Jack looked at his friend with new respect. He knew she was smart, but this was amazing. "But how could you recognize a pattern from Earth in an alien puzzle?" Lorg asked. "Some patterns are universal," Susan said. "Math and music are connected. Maybe your species discovered the same patterns we did." Professor Crix slowly bowed his eye stalks toward Susan. "In 300 years, no one has seen that connection. You have given us much to think about, human." As they left the mathematics hall, Jack felt a strange mix of pride and wonder. Humans might be new to space, but they brought their own ways of seeing the universe, ways that even the oldest alien civilizations might learn from. News of Susan's solution to the spiral paradox spread quickly through the Galactic Academy. The next day, alien students looked at Jack and Susan with new interest as they walked to their classes. Some seemed impressed, others looked worried. "Didn't think we would get so much attention," Jack said. "Me neither," Susan replied. I just saw the pattern. I didn't think it was such a big deal. Their next class was advanced problem solving. Jack was nervous about this one. The teacher was Professor Crix, the same alien whose puzzle Susan had solved. The classroom was smaller than the others. Only 12 students were there, 10 aliens and the 2 humans. Everyone sat in a circle instead of rows. Professor Crix entered. His 4 eyes moved around the room and stopped on Susan. Today, he said, we will discuss different ways to approach problems. Yesterday we had an interesting example of how different species think differently. He nodded toward Susan. Our human student solved a puzzle in a way none of us considered. Jack felt proud of his friend, but also a little jealous. He wished he could have done something impressive too. For today's class, Professor Crix continued, I have prepared a new challenge. This one has never been presented before. He touched a control on his desk. A hologram appeared in the center of the circle. It showed a strange maze. It was not flat like Earth mazes. It twisted in 3 dimensions with paths that seemed to bend in impossible ways. This is a navigation puzzle, Professor Crix explained. The goal is to find the shortest path from the start point to the end point. But there is a special rule. You can only change direction 3 times. The alien students leaned forward, studying the maze carefully. Susan took out her notebook again and started drawing. Jack stared at the hologram. The maze twisted and turned in ways that hurt his eyes. How could you only change direction 3 times and get through such a complex thing? Then he noticed something. The maze seemed familiar somehow. It reminded him of something. Can I ask a question? Jack said. Professor Crix turned all 4 eyes to him. Yes? Is this maze based on a real place? The alien teacher's eyes blinked in surprise. Yes, it is based on the transit system of the Zircon space station. How did you know? Jack smiled. It looked like a subway map. On Earth, we have underground trains called subways. The maps look a lot like this. Jack stood up and walked to, the hologram. May I? He asked. Professor Crix nodded. Jack pointed to the start point. If this is like a subway map, then we need to think about it differently. The paths aren't physical spaces. They're routes. He traced a line with his finger. You don't need to follow every twist and turn. You just need to pick the right routes and transfer points. The alien students watched as Jack followed one path, then switched to another at a junction. He did this 2 more times, reaching the end point. 3 direction changes, Jack said. 1, 2, 3. Professor Crix made a sound like bells ringing. Correct. You have found the solution. The alien students made clicking sounds that Jack had learned meant surprise or respect. But how did you see it so quickly? Asked one of the aliens, a small purple creature with 6 eyes. On Earth, I ride the subway every day, Jack explained. You learn to read the maps to find the fastest route with the fewest transfers. Professor Crix's eye stalks bent toward Jack. Fascinating. You recognize the pattern because of your daily experience on your home planet. Yes, Jack said. Just like Susan recognized the music pattern yesterday. This is most interesting, Professor Crix said. It seems humans have a special talent for seeing patterns in different ways. After class, Jack and Susan walked together to the dining area. That was amazing, Susan said. I was still trying to draw the whole maze when you solved it. Jack felt a warm glow of pride. It was just luck that it looked like a subway map. Not luck, said a voice behind them. They turned to see Professor Zarn, the blue alien who had first greeted them. I have been observing your progress, Professor Zarn said. The Academy is very interested in how humans solve problems. Is that why you invited humans to study here? Susan asked. Partly, Professor Zarn admitted. Our species have been solving problems in the same ways for thousands of years. We hoped humans might bring new perspectives. So we're like an experiment? Jack asked, feeling a little upset. All students are here to learn and to teach, Professor Zarn said. You learn from us and we learn from you. That is the purpose of the Academy. As they talked, a small robot approached them. Message for the human students, it said in a mechanical voice. A screen on the robot lit up, showing an alien face Jack didn't recognize. Greetings, humans, the alien said. I am Professor Vex of the Science Council. Your solutions to recent problems have caught our attention. We have a special challenge that has troubled us for many years. Would you be willing to attempt it? Jack and Susan looked at each other. What kind of challenge? Susan asked. A planetary defense system has malfunctioned, Professor Vex explained. It is on a small moon orbiting the gas giant core. The system was built by an ancient species that disappeared long ago. No one has been able to understand how it works or how to fix it. Why us? Jack asked. We're just students. We don't know anything about alien technology.
That is precisely why we want your help, Professor Vex said. You see patterns in new ways. You might see something our experts have missed. Is it dangerous? Susan asked. The moon is safe to visit, Professor Vex said. The defense system
is not currently active. But if we cannot fix it soon, the moon's orbit will decay. It will crash into the gas giant and be destroyed. Jack felt nervous but excited. A real mission to help aliens with a problem. How could they say no? We'll help, Jack said, looking at Susan. She nodded in agreement. Excellent, Professor Vex said. A ship will take you to the moon tomorrow. Professor Zarn will accompany you. After the robot left, Jack and Susan sat quietly for a moment. Are we really going to a moon around a gas giant? Susan asked. I guess so, Jack said. Do you think we can actually help? I don't know, Susan replied, but I think we should try. Later that night, Jack looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there was a moon with a problem that needed solving. Tomorrow they would be there. It was exciting and scary at the same time. He wondered what his parents would think if they knew. The small disk on his desk beeped. A message from Susan. Can't sleep. Too nervous about tomorrow. Jack smiled and sent back. Me too. But we'll figure it out together. The next morning, Jack and Susan met Professor Zarn at the docking bay. A small silver spaceship waited for them. It was shaped like a teardrop with smooth sides that reflected the lights of the bay. This is the Starhopper, Professor Zarn said. It will take us to the moon of Core. The journey will take 6 hours. Jack felt a mix of excitement and fear as they boarded the ship. Inside, the walls were covered with screens showing space outside. It made Jack feel like he was floating in space without a ship around him. It was both beautiful and scary. Please sit, Professor Zarn said, pointing to chairs that looked like they were made of soft blue gel. When Jack sat down, the chair formed around his body, holding him gently. The ship made no sound as it left the space station. The stars on the screens seemed to stretch into lines as the ship went faster than light. While we travel, Professor Zarn said, I will tell you about the moon we are visiting. It is called Lun 7, the 7th moon of the gas giant core. Long ago, an ancient species built a defense system there. We do not know why. The species disappeared thousands of years ago. What does the defense system do? Susan asked. It creates a shield around the moon, Professor Zarn explained. Recently, the shield has started failing. Our scientists discovered that Lun 7's orbit is not stable. It is slowly falling toward core. The defense system seems to have kept it in a stable orbit all these years. So if we can't fix the system, the moon will crash into the gas giant? Jack asked. Yes, Professor Zarn said. And the moon has many important minerals we need. We must fix the system. Jack looked at Susan. No pressure or anything, he whispered, trying to make a joke. 6 hours later, they arrived at Lun 7. From space, the moon looked gray with patches of red. Above them, the huge gas giant core filled half the sky. It was orange with swirls of yellow and white clouds. It was the most beautiful thing Jack had ever seen. The ship landed in a flat area. Professor Zarn gave Jack and Susan special suits to wear. The air here is not good for humans, he explained. These suits will keep you safe. Once they were dressed, they left the ship. The ground crunched under Jack's feet. It felt like walking on sand. In the distance, he saw a tall building made of black stone. It stuck up from the ground like a giant finger pointing at the sky. That is the control center for the defense system, Professor Zarn said. Many scientists have tried to understand it. None have succeeded. They walked to the building. Its walls were smooth and cold. No doors were visible. How do we get in? Susan asked. Watch, Professor Zarn said. He took a small device from his pocket and pointed it at the wall. A section of the wall disappeared, revealing a dark hallway. Inside, the air was still and smelled old. Their footsteps echoed as they walked. The walls had strange symbols carved into them. Can you read these? Jack asked. No, Professor Zarn said. No one can. The language of the Ancient Ones was never decoded. They reached a large room at the center of the building. In the middle stood a pillar of white crystal. Around it were 7 stone tables with more symbols on them. This is the control room, Professor Zarn said. The crystal pillar is the main control. The system is failing because the crystal is losing power. Jack walked around the room, looking at everything carefully. Susan went to one of the stone tables and traced the symbols with her finger. Our best scientists think the symbols are instructions, Professor Zarn explained. But we cannot understand them. Susan looked at all 7 tables, moving from one to the next. These symbols repeat in patterns, she said. Jack was looking at the crystal pillar. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Something about it seemed familiar to him. The crystal reminds me of something, he said. It's like... Suddenly, Susan called out, Jack, look at this! If you look at all 7 tables together, the symbols form a picture. Jack joined her. She was right. When seen from above, the symbols on all 7 tables created a larger pattern. It looks like a map, Jack said. A map of the solar system. Professor, Zarn's eyes widened. Yes, it shows core and its moons. Jack pointed to a symbol on the map. This must be Lun 7, where we are now. He traced the pattern outward. And these lines, they connect to other moons. Susan nodded excitedly. I think the defense system isn't just on this moon. It's connected to other moons too. Jack went back to the crystal pillar. He walked around it slowly, thinking hard. The crystal is losing power, he said, because it's not connected to the other parts of the system anymore. Yes, Susan agreed. The system must use all the moons together, somehow. Professor Zarn made a sound of surprise. So we need to activate parts on other moons? Maybe not, Jack said. He pointed to the map. Look, there are symbols for each moon. I think they're frequencies. Frequencies? Professor Zarn asked. Like radio signals, Jack explained. Each moon has its own frequency. I think the crystal pillar communicates with the other moons using these frequencies. Susan clapped her hands. Jack, you're a genius. The Ancient Ones built a system where all the moons work together to stay in orbit. Jack went to the crystal pillar and placed his hand on it. It felt warm and seemed to pulse faster at his touch. I think it responds to touch, he said. Maybe we need to input the right frequencies to reconnect it to the other moons. Working together, Jack and Susan figured out how to input the frequencies into the crystal. They used the map on the tables as a guide. As they worked, the crystal began to glow brighter. Professor Zarn watched in amazement. Our scientists spent years trying to understand this system. You solved it in hours. We just looked at it differently, Susan said. Sometimes fresh eyes see things others miss. When they input the last frequency, the crystal pillar lit up. With bright white light. The whole building began to hum with energy. Outside, a soft blue glow surrounded the moon. You did it, Professor Zarn exclaimed. The shield is active again. The moon's orbit will stabilize. As they left the building, Jack looked up at the gas giant core. It seemed less scary now, more like a beautiful painting in the sky. We make a good team, he said to Susan. We do, she agreed with a smile. And I think the Galactic Academy is going to be very interested in what we discovered. On the ship back to the Academy, Professor Zarn told them the Science Council was very pleased. They want you to help with other ancient systems, he said. Your way of thinking is valuable to us. Jack looked out at the stars as they flew through space. He thought about how far he was from Earth, but also how similar some things were across the universe. Problems needed solving everywhere, and humans, it seemed, had a special way of seeing solutions that others missed. 3 months had passed since Jack and Susan first arrived at the Galactic Academy. In that time, they had helped solve several ancient puzzles and systems that alien scientists had struggled with for years. Word of the human students spread through the galaxy. Now Jack and Susan stood in the Great Hall of the Academy, where all students and teachers had gathered. The hall was huge, with a high ceiling that showed the stars above through a clear dome. Thousands of aliens of all shapes and sizes filled the room. In the center was a raised platform where the Academy leaders stood. Jack felt nervous. "I didn't think so many would come," he whispered to Susan. "Me neither," she said. "It's a bit scary." Professor Zarn stood next to them, his blue skin looking brighter than usual. "You should be proud," he said. "This is a great honor." The head of the Academy, a tall silver alien named Grand Master Zell, stepped forward. The room went quiet. "Today, we celebrate a breakthrough in galactic understanding," Grandmaster Zell said. His voice was deep and carried through the whole hall without needing speakers. "For too long, we believed that newer species to join the galactic community had less to offer than the ancient ones." He gestured toward Jack and Susan. "These human students have shown us that different perspectives are valuable. They have solved puzzles that stumped our greatest minds simply by seeing things in new ways." Jack felt his face grow warm. He wasn't used to so much attention. Susan stood straighter beside him, but he could see her hands shaking slightly. Grandmaster Zell continued. "Because of their help with the ancient systems on the moons of Core, we have been able to stabilize 7 more systems across the galaxy. Systems built by the ancients that we could not understand before." A screen appeared above the platform, showing different planets and moons where Jack and Susan had helped. Jack remembered each one. The crystal caves of Lux 4, the floating city on a quarry, the strange underground machines of Terrace Prime. "But today," Grandmaster Zell said, "we face our greatest challenge yet, the puzzle of Zeta 9. The screen changed to show a small planet with rings around it. The rings glowed with strange colors. Zeta 9 was once the home of the ancients, Grandmaster Zell explained. Their final riddle is there, locked in a vault that has never been opened. Our scientists believe it contains knowledge that could help all species in the galaxy." Jack looked at Susan. They had heard rumors about Zeta 9 but never thought they would get to go there. "We have tried for 1,000 years to solve the final riddle and open the vault," Grandmaster Zell said. "Now we ask our human friends to try." A murmur went through the crowd. Jack felt a knot in his stomach. This was much bigger than the other puzzles they had solved. Professor Crix stepped forward. His 4 eyes were all focused on Jack and Susan. "The riddle of Zeta 9 is said to be impossible," he said. "But I have learned that humans have a special way of seeing the impossible as simply difficult." Jack remembered how Professor Crix had once doubted humans. Now he was one of their biggest supporters. "We will do our best," Susan said, her voice steady despite her nerves. Grandmaster Zell nodded. "A ship will take you to Zeta 9 tomorrow. 5 of our best scientists will go with you." Later, back in Jack's room, he and Susan talked about the mission. "Are you scared?" Jack asked. "Yes," Susan admitted, "but also excited. Think about it, Jack. We'll be the first humans to see the home of the ancient ones." Jack nodded. "I still don't understand why they think we can solve a riddle that stumped them for 1,000 years." "Because we think differently," Susan said. "Remember the spiral paradox? I saw music where they saw only math, and you saw subway maps in the navigation puzzle." "True," Jack said. "But this is the final riddle of an entire civilization. What if we fail?" Susan smiled. "Then we fail. But we'll have tried, and that's what humans do, right? We try impossible things." The next day, they boarded a large research ship called the Discovery. It was much bigger than the Starhopper they had used before. The 5 alien scientists were already on board, along with Professor Zarn and Professor Crix. "We've studied the riddle of Zeta 9 for centuries," One scientist, a tall insect-like alien named Dr. Vex, told them. The vault door has a series of symbols on it that change when touched. No combination we've tried has worked. As the ship traveled through space, Jack and Susan learned everything they could about the Ancient Ones. They had been a species called the Primars. They had explored the galaxy long before any other species reached the stars. Then suddenly, they disappeared. No one knew why. 2 days later, they reached Zeta 9. From space, it looked like a blue and green marble with glowing rings around it. The ship landed near a huge mountain. The vault is inside the mountain, Professor Zarn explained as they put on their suits. It's the only structure the primers left intact. They walked for an hour before reaching a massive door built into the side of the mountain. It was made of a black metal that seemed to absorb light. In the center were hundreds of small symbols arranged in circles. The alien scientists showed Jack and Susan how the symbols would change and move when touched. They explained all the combinations they had tried over the years. Susan studied the tower carefully. The symbols remind me of constellations, she said. Jack walked around the door, looking at it from different angles. Something about it seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. Then he had an idea. Can we see the door at night? He asked. Why? Dr. Vex asked. Just a hunch, Jack said. They waited until the planet's sun set. In the darkness, something amazing happened. The symbols on the door began to glow faintly, and when Jack looked up at the night sky, he gasped. Susan, look, he pointed upward. The stars. Susan looked up and her eyes widened. They matched the symbols. Jack nodded excitedly. It's not a combination lock. It's a star map. Working quickly, they figured out that the door would only open when the stars aligned exactly with the symbols. And that alignment was happening tonight for the first time in 1,000 years. As the last star moved into position, the symbols on the door all glowed bright blue. There was a deep rumbling sound, and slowly, the massive door began to open. Beyond, it was a large chamber filled with strange machines and walls covered in writing. In the center stood a single pedestal with a small crystal cube on it. The Knowledge Vault, Professor Zarn whispered in awe. As they entered the chamber, the crystal cube began to glow. A voice filled the air, speaking in a language none of them knew. Then amazingly, it switched to English. Welcome, star travelers, it said. If you have opened this vault, you have learned to see beyond your own perspective. You have learned the greatest lesson we hope to teach, that wisdom comes from many minds working together. Jack and Susan looked at each other in amazement. The Ancient Ones had left this message knowing that someday, species from across the galaxy would need to work together to find it. As they left Zeta 9 days later, with copies of the ancient knowledge safely stored, Jack looked out at the stars. He thought about how far humans had come, from a single planet to helping solve the greatest puzzles in the galaxy. We belong out here, he said to Susan. She nodded. And the galaxy needs us, just like we need them. Professor Crix joined them by the window. What will you do when you return to Earth? He asked. Jack smiled. Tell everyone that the universe is bigger and stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined, and that we have friends waiting for us among the stars.